everyone. Welcome to the next episode of YP2G Corner and Neville's Corner. Today we have Ms. Fatima Asad-Said from Abacus Consulting, Pakistan. And thank you very much, Fatima, for giving us the time to join us on this live interview. I will give a quick introduction about you, Fatima. So a little bit about Ms. Fatima Asad-Said, who's an integral member of the top leadership at Abacus Consulting, in a leading international professional services firm offering cutting-edge technology, outsourcing, and consulting solutions to clients across 3 continents. Our portfolio includes leading the human capital solutions business and internally the corporate HR and PMO functions. She is also CEO of Abacus ELS, a subsidiary of AC, offering HR outsourcing solutions and responsible for strategically managing the alliance partnership with Mercer, a leading global HR consulting firm. She has over 20 years of change management, organizational structuring, and human capital development experience through strategic formulation and project management roles. That's quite an impressive profile, Fatima, you have. So let me now introduce Neville. Neville, unfortunately, is traveling, so today he's only available through his VoIP, and unfortunately, we will not be able to see him on the video. So Neville, as you mentioned, we'll be missing your beauty, but over to you, and you can start formally, proceed with your interview now with Fatima.
Thanks, Ali. I'm not too sure about missing my beauty, but let's go ahead. And the purpose of this interview, as many people will now know, is to strip out the noise and the myths so that we give young people the facts, no matter how hard it might be for them to accept. And I'm delighted to be joined by Fatima today, as we're going to get some real insights into a slightly different world than just core business. So welcome, Fatima, and as we get straight into the discussion, let's look at a very macro type level. What do you think are the biggest challenges that businesses face today?
Okay. Thank you very much, Neville and Ali, for this opportunity. It is an honor and a privilege. So in terms of the business challenges that face our world, we are in the midst of the 4th industrial revolution. And by the advent and by the very nature of the 4th industrial revolution, we're talking about AI and robotics. We're talking about the speed of change, which is exponential, and the pressure it puts on businesses is not only to ensure that they're continuously transforming their environments, their structures, their policies, etc., but also the pressure it puts on the human capital abilities and capabilities and competencies that are there, which need to be not only honed in but also redefined on a very quick pace level. So I believe that when we talk about transformation, it is the ability of the organization to adapt to the changing external environment to ensure that they remain competitive, but also they remain sustainable. We see large organizations, seemingly very large organizations, which were which had a sound foundation, over the last 2 decades being overtaken or replaced by organizations which have just recently been set up in terms of, if you look at a timeline basis on a relative, if we talk about Facebook or we talk about Airbnb or we talk about Uber, just to name a few, these are the kind of business models which are replacing what are traditional business models. So I believe in a nutshell, it would be the pace with which an organization can adapt in terms of structures, policies, systems, and people. It's also the ability to know now how the environment is going to transform and how your customer is going to transform 10 years from now. So if we are preparing for today's challenges, then we're already redundant. So the pressure on to be predictive and to know what will span out in the next 10-15 years is an ability that winning organizations need to have right now. plus complementing that, or maybe if not complementing is not the right word, but additional pressures of greater security, due diligence, especially information security and challenges like cyber crimes, etc. Just the environment that we have, where there is more documentation, heavy regulatory pressures that are coming in from governments. So from a risk perspective, organizations need to be very cognizant of the fact that are we looking at the entire organization from a holistic approach, and defining an enterprise risk management framework right at the outset. So in my mind, these are some of the challenges that define the businesses today.
That's brilliant, Fatima, and it really does bring it together in a nutshell of some quite serious challenges. And as you say, the world has changed. And even 12, 13 years ago, Facebook was just a twinkle in the eye of Mark Zuckerberg. He hadn't really launched it. So we are looking at a rapidly changing, technologically driven arena. And as you say, we're right in the middle. For some people, we're right in the middle. For some people, we haven't got there yet. But this fourth revolution, industrial revolution, or whatever you want to call it, and I heard that very loud and clear in Ghana when I was presenting yesterday. They had one specific section on this fourth revolution. And it's very challenging because it's not capital driven. It's going to be human driven,
yes.
Which is probably the first time ever in the world's experience that we're now relying upon talent. We are totally relying upon the quality of the individual in the organization. Now, some people might say that we've been there for years.
Yes.
But we are now totally reliant upon that. Money's not an option, not a problem anymore. It's actually who we're employing. Are they driven by themselves? Are they driven by the organisation? And we see it really coming through with millennials.
Yes.
I don't like using labels, but everyone knows about, the millennials, those being under 30. And Pakistan is in a fantastic position in that there's a huge population of young people coming through, and it's growing day by day, and these young people are going to drive the country forward as far as I can see it.
Absolutely.
So when it comes...
Sorry,
yeah,
we have... Sorry, please go ahead.
Okay, well, I'm just getting into if we're going to go now, we are changing from a capital-driven economy into a human-driven economy. What are businesses looking for when they hire a new employee?
Okay, so the challenges that we spoke of, and you also very well articulated what is happening in different parts of the world, and obviously each country is on a different timeline in terms of where they stand on the development phase. And one could argue that maybe the more developing countries have a wider breadth of being innovative and creative because they haven't been there as long. So maybe I would look at it from a positive angle. Similarly in Pakistan as well, you see not that much structure, or it's a canvas which is yet to be discovered, if I may use that term, and the structure, and it doesn't confine a lot of people, young people out there, to take chances, because it's a space that no one has actually stepped into as yet. So I believe we should take it from a positive angle, and encourage the youth to innovate, to be creative, to be original. It's extremely important, because right now even countries and governments and regulatory bodies are redefining, and they're also actually struggling to redefine that how do they manage technology. So from a human capital perspective, if you just look at it from a skill set perspective, you would see that the challenges that the new talent management or the new talent or the new workforce has is, you talk about the ability to manage in a diverse environment. You talk about a global mindset at the outset, because with technology platforms, the customer is no longer confined to a particular geographic region, or at least not in the long run. If you want to be sustainable, then the ability to reach out to a more global audience becomes extremely important. Also, the ability to be very willing to learn very quickly and then apply that knowledge and be able to be positive about how do we navigate through the steps that are required from a creative but also an analytical perspective. So there is more pressure. You mentioned that yes, the human capital is the most important capital at this point in time, which will drive the future. But that also means that the humans need to be more proactive in terms of the way they analyze, they problem solve, the way they adapt to the changing environments. And this is also linked up to, if you look at the breakdown of, you mentioned, we don't like to use labels, but quite frankly, we live in a world which is segmented. And we talk about multi-generational segmentation, you talk about multicultural generation. The millennials fall into the multi-generational categories that are there within organizations and within countries as well. In Pakistan, as I mentioned, there are 100 million people who are under the age of 24. That is a huge mass exodus of people coming into the workforce. And this is a generation which we may not be as very high up on the educational index or on the literacy index, but what we are interestingly high on is the mobile connections that we have and the access, which is actually, it may be a conflict, but it's a reality. We have even our domestic help or individuals who come from different social stratas and maybe socially impoverished stratas as well. They have their mobiles. I mean, I've seen our domestic help, my driver or our cook as well. He has a smartphone, which is a bit of an annoyance because they can't put the phone down and they're constantly on that because they're solving problems back home in the village. And I was just telling him the other day, I said, if you're constantly solving problems, I need someone in the office to solve my problems. But it's an interesting, situation to be in. And these people, I mean, our cook doesn't know how to read and write properly, but he knows how to go onto YouTube. He knows how to make those phone calls. He knows how to WhatsApp someone. So it's interesting the kind of skill set that this next generation is being born into, and it's just a way of life for them. So therein lies an opportunity, but it also is a responsibility to make sure that this is used for the betterment and in terms of productive outlay and input as well. So even multi-generational, when you see the millennials and you have Gen X and Gen Y, the baby boomers are more on the retirement side or already in the retirement side, but you have these segmentations within an organization as well. And then also the last one is, and of course with the segmentation is their attitudes and their behaviors and what values they bring to the table. What do they see in terms of the workforce? But you also see a workforce which is mobile and on the move. So the millennials, if we speak about the millennials, would like to be able to do their work for any time, anywhere, any place. They don't want to be really confined, generally speaking, to walls and structure in terms of physical structure. They should be able to be on holiday and be able to do their work. So this puts demand on just the general attitudes that we need to have at the leadership level and to bring in those changes so we can really leverage on building skills which will enable the workforce to be successful.
Thank you.
That,
Well, if I may
that's
just
so
pitch in.
wonderfully. That is so wonderfully put. Sorry to cut across, Ali, but that's so wonderfully put, because in all of your comments, not once did you mention academically qualified, apart from being literate.
Yes.
And that's an interesting arena, and I'll come back to that. But I'll now let Ali butt in, because I think he's got something burning to ask you.
Yeah, I mean, as we know, Pakistan is a country of young people. In fact, I was reading in the news this morning that as we are heading towards elections in coming months, it is the youth which will, decide who will be forming the next government. So about like 46% electoral vote will be coming out of the youth. Fatima, you've been into an HR industry as a consultant for the last 20 years. So if I may ask you, what are some of the skill gaps that you have observed or identified among the youth while hiring? And what are the causes?
Okay. Just before I address that, it's interesting you highlighted, Neville, the gap that I had. I purposely did not mention education because maybe I assume that there is a certain level of basic education which is required before you enter into any organization, depending on what the specifications are. But that education will not get you where we need to be in this changing world. So we can talk about that a bit later.
Sure.
As well. But obviously the assumption is there is a certain level of basic education, otherwise it just won't fly. But Ali, based on your question, the gaps are more about attitude, I would say. Yes, a good education is very important. There is a lot of pressure on universities and schools and colleges in Pakistan to enhance and upgrade and rethink their curriculum, rethink the model that they have. The good thing is that these academic institutions are listening. I myself am a part of a group which is facilitating greater academia and industry linkages to give that feedback in order to ensure that the supply and demand connect is strengthened. And that is extremely important at this point in time. If the supply is not aligned to what the organizations are demanding, then we will have a massive employment issue, not because we don't have the people, because they're just not what organizations want. And there will be a war on talent greater than what we're facing right now. So one is ensuring that there is an alignment between supply and demand, and that is where some individuals face a challenge of getting the right job. The second thing is about grooming and the ability to work in an environment which is not just demanding technical competence and excellence. It is demanding EQ, it's demanding creativity, it's a demanding, IQ is there, of course, but it's much more than that. It's demanding this ability to create value through a visionary approach. I'm not sure if there's a quotient for that as well, but I hear that they are coming up. So you're looking at beyond IQ and EQ, you're talking about adaptiveness as well in this environment. So grooming someone to think not only creatively, but to analyze and to critically reason is where I feel that we are missing. We're missing the bus over there. I come across quite a few. Well, as a employer, of course, I interview quite a few people at all levels, and it's sometimes unfortunate to see that students who are graduating from seemingly very good institutions, they don't have a very strong ability to critically reason or problem solve. It's more about, this is the competence I bring from an academic knowledge perspective, but the real world is very different. You have amazing examples out there of individuals, which, by the way, that's also another challenge. I have my sons right now challenge me. I'll bring that example to the table. They're 11 and 13, mashallah, and they challenge me in saying, why do we need an education? And I'm like, what do you mean? Why do you need an education? They're saying, look, there's so many examples. I mean, they're very aware because of the technology being available to them. It's not like when we were growing up, we just had that one phone call and one phone in the house and one TV, with a few channels. But these children have access to so many different mediums of information. So they go around telling me, they're saying, listen, the youngest YouTuber is a multi-million, millionaire. He's still in high school, or he's not even completed his high school. Then he talks about individuals like Steve Jobs or Jack Ma and other individuals who have perhaps not completed their education, and look at where they are, or they opted to get out of formal education and now they're doing it their own way. So it's interesting, these precedents are coming up. So the youth is also challenging the paradigms that exist, and it is a challenge for us who are looking for stability within our organizations. Does that answer your question, Ali?
Absolutely. I think one of the most important one that you mentioned is the ability to reason. And I can also just present what I went through just this morning. My 7-year-old boy is having, he's going through some severe cough. So I wanted to give him honey. And he told me this morning that if you tell me how is it produced, then I will eat it. And I'm like, okay. So I had to show him a YouTube video this morning how honey is being produced.
It's funny you mentioned that, Ali. Yesterday, I had a conversation with my 13-year-old. They've got their final exams going on these days. So he was supposed to be focusing on his mathematics. That's the exam he had today. And all of a sudden, he's like, I went on to Google and I've researched that you keep on telling us to have our milk. Actually, milk doesn't really do much for the bones. And I'm like, where did you get that from? He said, I studied that the vitamin D content and the calcium in milk is not as much if you get it from the greens and some other sources. And I was just looking at his face. And I said, don't mind taking off. It's not going to work just because you're a mother and telling them to do things.
Exactly. The cow eats green and it gives us milk. So.
Yes, absolutely. So it's an interesting world where if we're facing these challenges with our children, you sort of extrapolate and see the other young talent that is coming into the world, into the workforce. How do we address and how do we talk to them? The way we talk to them has to change as well.
The way we talk to them really does have to change, because these young people now, I mean, Ali mentioned his 7-year-old who's conversant with technology and looking on YouTube. You have an 11 and a 13-year-old that's effectively asking you a really tough question. What's the purpose of education today? And the interesting thing for me is that I asked that question. I've been asking the question in the UK for the last 15 years. When I started as a school governor and became chair of governors, I said, so what's the purpose of education? And the interesting thing is, I don't think the educators know anymore.
Yes.
Because when I went to school, I'm 59 years old and I graduated from university in 1980. Mm-hmm. And the contract, if you like, was get good qualifications, get a good job. That contract you can rip up today. Yes. Because, as you said, there's an underlying expectation of where someone who's been through the education system needs to be. Now, whether that's a graduate level or A-levels or O-levels, the point is you and I, as employers, recruiters, look at the individual of, well, you're a graduate, great, now what? Now what else do you offer? And I think, as you say, some institutions are waking up to the fact that the supply is not meeting the demand. I mean, you put it very, very simply. A lot of people wouldn't like that phrase when we're talking about, real people, but that's the fact. In the UK, for every one graduate job, there's over 100 applications. In Ghana, I'm told it's 5 times worse. Again, because there's far more young people coming through. 57% of the population is under 25 in Ghana. As you said, almost 100% is under the age of 25 in Pakistan. So we've got a real challenge here. The leaders of today have got a real challenge, and that's why we created YP2G, which is it's a leadership program fundamentally, soft skills, leadership, call it what you like, but it's really about helping young people step into the world of work with the right attitude, with the right concepts, being adaptable. You use that word a number of times early on. And really focusing on what the issues are today, because they're very different from the issues of less than 3 or 4 years ago. And the war on talent, as you mentioned, I love the phrase. I'm not too sure I love the meaning of the phrase, but there is a war on talent. And I wrote an article about 4 years ago of the very same thing. And it's a balloon that's about to burst if we're not careful.
Yes.
And the Uber of... Yeah,
sorry,
please go ahead. Please go ahead. It has to go on. So let's just move on a little bit as to look back a few years now, not that many years for you. You're now a rising 20-year-old, looking at your future. What advice would you have given? You have two young children, 11 and 13. What advice would you give to them now? Were you just starting out?
Okay, when I saw your questions, it actually really made me think, and it made me also, and I really appreciate that, rethink the way I'm managing my boys, because as a mother you tend to have a certain different approach to certain the way you're bringing up children. Obviously the responsibility is very different as opposed to being in the workforce.
Yes.
And it really made me think that, okay, what is it when I came into the workforce, after my MBA, slightly older than 20s, I mean, in my mid-20s, I was a bit clueless, to tell you very honestly. I mean, obviously, one is at a great high. University is the best time in anyone's life. You had just a fantastic time, and you're still in that, what you call I call the university honeymoon period. Post, and you're just coming into the workforce.
I call it a bubble.
Yes, and you're this bubble, and then reality hits you, and it hits you really badly, because you're like, oh my God, this is not what I expected at all, because you're still having a lot of fun in your mind. So, I mean, you do have fun at work, but it's a different kind of fun. But I feel that, but it was okay. We learned to swim. We learned not to flounder too much, or we learned to make those mistakes and then rise above the occasion with the guidance. But it was very structured. It was sort of a disciplined approach towards, you do your education and then you go into the workforce and you work. And then obviously in our cultural perspective, we have other challenges as well. So I had to navigate through other questions asked, rather than just saying, oh, this was just, it wasn't assumed that I would work throughout. In Pakistan, you have this cultural aspect of, it's not necessary a female will work beyond a few years after she has graduated. If she gets married, sometimes she has to stop working, etc. But that's a different debate, the concept of diversity and women coming into the workforce as well. And it's changed very significantly. But as far as the youth is concerned, right now, they are much more aware. I think my 13-year-old is more aware than I was maybe at 18, 19 in certain knowledge levels, etc. And they already know to a large extent what they want, because they have access to learning platforms which are online. They have access to environments that they can go and log into in terms of workshops or simulations or virtual scenarios as well, and they're already doing that before they even hit the formal workforce. So the other aspect there is, I'm just putting this in context, Neville. I'm sorry if I'm taking too long.
Sure. No.
But it's very important to understand the context of where these millennials are coming from. And so they've already navigated through that. They've already done internships, work done, which is very heartening, by the way, the social enterprise or social give back that these millennials also have. So they're already involved in the charity aspect, doing some other activities as well, being part of some forums which give them opportunities and exposure at a global level at a very young age. Plus, they don't like structure as much, so they want that space of being able to to have the ability to be adventurous and choose what they want to do, and saying, and it's for them, it's all right. It's no longer lifetime employment or commitment to in lifetime employment. Even in our time, that was waning, but now no one even thinks that. Everyone thinks 2 or 3 years, and then they think, okay, what do we want to do after that? Plus the individualism, what's in it for me? So when you put in this, all of these factors into place, the advice that I would give the youth is ensure that you are constantly learning. Two, you don't have to confine yourself to one particular discipline. You can navigate your experiences and what they call their life experiences through, to learn many more disciplines in a short period of time, but also ensure that the value system that you have is solid. Know what you value. Know that if you are committing to something, if you're dedicated, then do that with integrity, which is something I feel that we've lost the plot in terms of guiding our next generation on having a solid value system, which is the key foundation for a good life or a happy life or a successful life, however you want to, I mean, whatever one's objectives are. So the integrity of the process, the integrity of learning, the integrity of giving back, what does it mean? Whatever you may do. And thirdly, make sure that one's approach to life is celebrates diversity and celebrates tolerance. Because in this world where everyone is connected through technology and will become much more connected through technology over the next few decades, we need to look beyond borders. We need to look beyond walls, if I may. I mean, that's your tagline as well. We talk about learning, without borders as well.
Yes,
But
we
it
do.
is,
Yeah.
but unfortunately, we're also living in a world, if you look at what's happening in globally from a conflict perspective, of this emergence of nationalism, of this emergence of unfortunate conflicts and war that is going on as well. So it's a very difficult time for everyone on the corporate side, on the work front, on the technology front. Everyone's coming closer together, and we're talking about diversity and compassion and tolerance. And on the other hand, you have the powers that be, more involved in where are the walls. I mean, what Mr. Trump keeps on saying, let's build those walls, which is ludicrous, where you have to work in a more seamless environment. So there is a conflict that these young people have to navigate through as well, and then they find their own. The last thing is, which is very heartening, is that the millennials don't really bring a certain baggage of how their countries have transformed or how they've emerged on their own journeys, whether that's a 500-year existence or it's a 50-year existence. They are finding their own space, and they're like, this is what resonates with us, and this is what we're going to do. We're not really, yes, we need that paycheck, but we're also need for us, what is the purpose of us being there? So they're thinking the value that they bring to the table and the value that their interactions bring to them. So that's a beautiful quality to have, and it is our responsibility to encourage that. But the starting point is the value system. What is your value system? Are you dedicated and committing yourself to learning? Are you dedicating yourself to creating value as you go along? Are you dedicating yourself to continuous learning and also helping each other to create a more diverse, diversity, culturally acceptable, tolerant world, and whatever your world may be, as however you may define it?
Brilliant. Very well.
That is brilliant. I mean, there are so many there are so many gems in what you've been sharing, and I'm sure many of our young people will be opening their eyes wider and wider, and realizing actually that they're probably falling well short of that expected level. And that's part of growing up, and that's part of what these sessions are all about, and it's raising their awareness. So they see the reality of life. I mean, we're constantly talking business about closing the perception reality gap, and I will regularly talk about being a leader that navigates around the organization. What that means is you need to know exactly what's happening, not what you think is happening, not what someone's telling you their perception of what's happening, but walking around the organization and seeing it for yourself. And that's where I think these sessions are absolutely invaluable, because young people are going to be getting a real insight into the world of business as you see it from your particular angle. The fact that you can bring in your children that are challenging you, which is great, because that keeps us young. It keeps us thinking. It keeps us vibrant. It keeps us adaptable in not just the home environment, but in the business environment. And that's key, frankly, Fatima, to leaving our personal legacy. I'm a firm believer in that. I've got 5 children. It's not just leaving a legacy for them; it's leaving a legacy for everyone around them. And that's a massive challenge. But like anything good in life, I'm afraid we're coming to the end of our time. So I'd love to thank you for all of the gems that you've shared. I wish you all the best within your organisation, and certainly when your boys grow up, YP2G will be ready for them. But you never know, there may be another version, but we're aiming at the teenager arena, because that's the arena that's the preparation is so important, because they can go off the rails at 13 or 14 and go onto the wrong YouTube channel, Yes,
absolutely. I mean, that's the scary. One could have an extended discussion on that as well, that how do you sort of manage that aspect as well. But I think the key is, one, communication, open communication with the generation, and not treat them as a child, but treat them as they know what they're talking about, and allow them to make mistakes, but give them the guidance so they take their own decisions. So when they own that and they accept that they have taken their own decisions and they've made their mistakes, have the ability to be resilient enough to learn from your mistakes, get back up again. The favorite story that I keep on telling my boys, and now they just roll their eyes that, oh, mom's gone on to another life mode. These life lessons have got to stop. Is I say, in boxing, the person who loses is not the person who falls down. It's the person who can't get back up again. So just remember that. And that's what you do in life. So if you know that, if you have the strength and the courage, and you learn, why did you fall down? Make sure you don't fall down in the same manner. Maybe you fall down in another manner. That's how you make mistakes and learn. So that's how we take it forward. But one thing, Neville, I will say, and this is more of a message to those who are in charge today as business leaders, whether they're at the government level, whether they're at organization level, they're the ones who really need to change. Because the change over here at the youth level is phenomenal and exponential. They're wanting that. There's going to be a lot of frustration. But if our structures, our organizations are going to remain archaic and not be flexible enough to transform and hear what these people are saying, then they are going to, unfortunately, have an early demise, or they will not be sustainable at all. So I see the greatest roadblock or obstacle to change is perhaps people who are right now in decision-making positions, whatever that may be.
You're absolutely right. You're absolutely right. And the interesting thing is, it's just another decision.
Yes.
But this is the decision they must get right. There is no leeway here for making the wrong decision. This is a decision that it's absolutely paramount to get right. Otherwise, the war on talent will come right at them and hit them straight between the eyes.
Yes.
And they will lose connectivity within their organisation. And it's not a threat, actually. It's a promise. If you don't do something right now, then the consequences are all of your own.
Yes.
And it's stark reality.
It is a stark. I sit on 3 other external boards as well of a couple of non-for-profit organizations and also education, LUMS, Lahore University of Management Sciences, which is also my alma mater. So I'm part of their board of trustees now as of last year. And I see, the gaps and the flexibility even at that level. Some are more flexible, some have to navigate through why do we need to change so quickly, etc. So it's just interesting, the dynamics that are taking place at that level. The good news is they are allowing the next generation to come in and partake in that conversation and be part of the decision making. So that's very heartening. I'm the youngest member of that board, so
excellent.
Hopefully, I'll be able to make some kind of difference.
and I think it's well within your capability to make it happen from this short conversation. But let's just leave it there, if that's all right with you, Fatima. Thank you so much for joining with us today. And I'm going to just hand over to Ali just to wrap up, and hope to see you soon.
It was a pleasure, and if you're ever in Pakistan, let us know. It'd be a delight to meet you.
I will be.
Thank you.
Thank you
very much. Thank you, Neville, and thank you very much, Fatima. Once again, as Neville kept on mentioning, there are so many gems out of this talk that needs to be snipped out. So I would be actually start sharing this with all the young people. And you rightly mentioned it's the values that needs to be, injected in them. So once again, thank you very much, and we look forward to remaining engaged. So for your time, and
thank you. My pleasure. It was a privilege. Take care and have a great weekend.
You too. Thank you very much. Take care.
All right.
Cheerio. Bye bye.